All right, so this is an outline of my presentation. I'm going to go through the background, the aim, the methods, the results, and then a bit of the discussion. A high coverage of HPV vaccination is a key intervention in the WHO's global cervical cancer elimination strategy. However, approximately 15% of girls are immunized against a goal of 90%. And I think with COVID, this came down to about 13%. Single dose efficacy is supported by observational studies, as Deborah has presented. And a single dose HPV vaccination approach has a potential to simplify the logistics and decrease the costs of HPV vaccination. However, due to gaps in evidence for single-dose HPV vaccine efficacy, including the rigor of the clinical trials and concerns about clinically meaningful lower efficacy, policymakers recommend multi-dose HPV vaccination. So our primary objectives for this study were to test the efficacy of immediate single-dose non-valent or bivalent HPV vaccination to prevent incident persistent HPV type 16 and 18 infection, and to test the efficacy of immediate single-dose non-valent HPV vaccination to prevent incident persistent high-risk HPV 16, 18, 31, 33, 45, 52, and 58 infection. So this is our study design. It's an individual randomized double-blind control 3-group trial. It's a multi-center trial that we're conducting as the three KEMRI centers. Three KEMRI centers in Kenya, in central Kenya, and in western Kenya. For enrollment, we're enrolling young women aged between 15 and 20 years. The eligibility was 1 to 5 lifetime partners, HIV negative, no previous HPV vaccination or contraindication to HPV, and resident within the areas of the study. And these girls were randomized in a 1-to-1 fashion to either immediate non-valent vaccine and delayed meningococcal vaccine, or to immediate bivalent vaccine and delayed meningococcal vaccine, or to immediate meningococcal vaccine and delayed HPV vaccine. This slide is showing how our study is organized. We have the young women who meet the eligibility criteria that I talked about getting randomized. And at baseline, we're doing clinician-collected cervical and vulvovaginal swabs for HPV DNA for the 7 types listed there, as well as collecting serum for the antibodies against the 7 HPV types. And then at month 3, we do a self-collected vaginal swab and do DNA, check for HPV DNA for the 7 HPV types. And then we follow them up every 6 months, collecting cervical vulval samples for the 7 HPV types. And then for the month 18, which is the analysis that I'm going to be presenting, we are collecting both the cervical vulval samples as well as antibodies, serum for the antibodies. In terms of analysis, we'll be presenting a modified intention to treat population, which basically excludes prevalent infections and or antibody positive. And the primary endpoints for this study are incident persistent cervical infection, at least 4 months apart. So our primary efficacy outcomes, we are reporting results at month 18, reporting vaccine efficacy, and we are presenting the modified ITT cohorts, which are basically people who tested negative for HPV DNA, either at enrollment or at month 3, and antibody negative at enrollment. And we're also presenting pre-planned sensitivity analysis. ignore the not presented today. We are presenting it today. Which basically includes all the data. And we've got a bit of a relaxed sensitivity cohort, which includes participants who test antibody positive at enrollment, and a more stringent cohort, which then excludes participants with HPV DNA at enrollment, month 3 and month 6, and or antibody positive at enrollment. So now I'll present the results. I'll begin with the enrollment and baseline characteristics. So we enrolled between December 2018 and November 2019. There was no difference in enrollment characteristics by group. 57% of the participants were aged between 15 and 17 years. And at least 61% had reported one lifetime sexual partner. The randomization work, we can see that the numbers are pretty equal across the 3 groups. For the modified ITT cohort for HPV 16 and 18, 29% of the participants were HPV 16 and 18 DNA positive at enrollment, or had an antibody positive at enrollment and therefore were excluded. This left us with about 1,458 participants who were then included in this particular cohort. And we can see that still the randomization remains balanced across the 3 arms. For the extended cohort looking at the 7 HPV high-risk types, 52% were actually positive for these 7 types at enrollment or month 3, or having an antibody positive at enrollment, and so were excluded, leaving us with about 615 participants were then included in this cohort. For obvious reasons, we don't use the bivalent vaccine group. And we're able to see that still between the nanovalent and the meningococcal arms, they were fairly well balanced. In terms of retention was really high at month 18. 98% of the participants had at least 2 endpoints. 94% of the participants had at least 3 endpoints. The median time between 2 swabs was actually 5.8 months, and 6% of the swabs collected were self-collected vaginal swabs. I'm going to present the incidence of the non-vaccine HPV types, which are listed there. We had a total of 53 cases happening in the non-valent arm as well as the meningococcal arm, and about 55 in the bivalent arm. And the incidence of persistent non-vaccine type was on average about 22.2 per 100 human years across all the 3 arms. So now I'll present the primary efficacy results. This at month 18 for the 2 cohorts, the 2 modified ITT cohorts for the 16 and 18, and for the 7 high-risk groups, 16, 18, 31, 33, 45, 52, and 58. So looking at efficacy against type 16 and 18, in total, we had about 38 cases occurring, with only 1 in the non-valent arm, 1 in the bivalent arm, and 36 in the meningococcal arm. This gave us an overall vaccine efficacy rate of 97.5% in both the non-valent arm and the bivalent arm when compared to the meningococcal arm. So I know, was it Alfred from Uganda who was saying the science should tell us? This is the science speaking. And for the 7 high-risk HPV type, we had 33 cases occurring of the incident persistent HPV, and only 4 were in the non-valent arm and 29 were in the meningococcal vaccine arm, giving us an overall vaccine efficacy of 88.9 for the non-valent arm when compared to the meningococcal vaccine arm. So now I'll present the sensitivity analysis, and basically this includes all data. So we were looking at the data at month 18, but when you look at all data at the time of the cutoff, which was June 24, 2021, gives us a bit of about 6 extra months. We're looking at about 24 months of data. And the first sensitivity cohort, which is more relaxed and includes participants with HPV antibodies at enrollment, you can see we had about 52 incident persistent cases, with only 1 in the non-valent arm, 2 in the bivalent, and 48 in the meningococcal arm, and an overall vaccine efficacy of 98.2 in the non-valent arm and 94.4 in the bivalent arm when compared to meningococcal vaccine arm. And then when we look at the extended sensitivity cohort, which excludes participants with HPV DNA detected at month 6, so a much tighter group, you can see that there were 0 cases in both the bivalent and the non-valent group, and 16 cases in the meningococcal vaccine group, giving us an overall vaccine efficacy of 100% in both groups when compared to the meningococcal vaccine arm. So for discussion, we see that we had adolescent girls and young women were effectively protected from HPV infection over the first 18 months post-vaccination with a single dose. The vaccine efficacy for type 16 and 18 was over 97%, which is in keeping with the licensure trials for 3 doses. We also saw that the prevalence for the high-risk vaccine types was really high, about 9 per 100 women years, which is about a third higher than the previous vaccine trials. Overall, we present a study which has got several strengths. We have a rigorous design. We've got high fidelity to the protocol. We've got high retention. We've got clear ascertainment of outcomes, and therefore provide strong evidence for single HPV vaccine efficacy. What we are doing right now is what you're calling a blinded crossover vaccination to evaluate durability up to month 55. Thank you.